Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Development Committee, Thursday, the 12th of December. My name is Councillor Roy MacDonald, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. The committee are sitting in the front row and facing me, and we have officers up here at the top table to give us guidance. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Lyon. I'm the Development Manager.
Good morning, everyone. Rob Argyle, Senior Planning Officer.
Lauren Gregory, Democratic Services, and just to my left, she hasn't got a microphone, is Linda Wilson, Democratic Services.
Russell Williams, Assistant Director for Planning.
Fiona Croxton, Solicitor to the Council.
Thank you. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, but if one sounds, the exits are at either side of me up here. And if anybody needs the toilet, it's out in the foyer. Members of the public are not to interact with committee members if we have any breaks, which if we're still going at 11 AM, we may stop for a coffee. Thank you. Have we got any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Paul Heinrich, Councillor Gerard Banstini-Boyle and Councillor Adam Varley. And if I may, with the next item, Chairman, there are no substitutes present in attendance.
Thank you. Can we now look at the minutes for the meeting November the 14th? And has anybody got any corrections for it, please?
Just to advise, apologies, Chairman, the minutes from the 14th of November weren't circulated. They will be provided to the next meeting.
Thank you. Any items of urgent business?
None received.
And the order of business, I assume, is as per agenda. Have we got any declarations of interest, please? No? Okay. So item 8 is chapter set PO 231025. And
Good morning, everyone. The application before you today is PO 231025, which is seeking outline planning permission for the creation of a new film and TV studios. It includes 5 sound stages with attached costume and makeup facilities, 8 workshops, a production facility building, an ancillary office, a concession film studio and amenities, and a security gatehouse. The application also includes the relevant car parking, landscaping, and new vehicular access. The application is an outline planning permission, which at this stage omits certain details until a later submission is made. This application is known as the reserve matters, which will provide these in the event of approval. In this instance, the application before you is seeking the principle only, with all matters reserved, so it does not include complete details of access, appearance, landscaping, scale, and layout. This type of application is suitable for large-scale developments where the details are subject to change. The location of the site is shown here, and in context to its surrounding roads and settlements. I have shown the boundary between our authority and Kings Lynn with a blue line. As you can see, it is fairly close, less than 1 kilometre. The site is accessed from the B1454, which is shown in green. This road connects to the prominent A149 to the south, which I have shown in yellow. The small community of Wickham Green Village lies to the north of the site, who are the most immediate residential neighbours. This has been labelled green. This is, pardon me, this is the red line boundary of the application. To the area to the northeast, with a blue boundary, is the approved converted building to a studio, which was granted under PF 221561. For further context, this is the site overlain over a 2022 aerial photograph. As you can see, at present, the site remains mostly grassland and tree covered. A grouping of poplars encloses the 2 buildings on the site used by a vehicle repair company. There is also a semicircle of trees, which may be a leftover element of its previous RAF use. The next slide shows the area with it designated as foul water drainage catchment area under the under nutrient neutrality advice, which is covered under the Environmental Act 2021. As set out within the committee report, the LPA cannot issue approvals for schemes within these areas without sufficient information that demonstrates the impact upon protected sites. This application is considered to require this information, and current negotiations are ongoing to address this. In terms of nutrient neutrality, this proposal will require an atypical way of demonstrating this, as it is a commercial proposal and unable to use the standard methodology for calculating that residential proposals can use. In order to ensure that this is delivered and feasible, a deadline of the 31st of March 2025 has been given in order to provide this to the satisfaction of Natural England and the local planning authority. This slide shows the existing site as previously described. It is rotated slightly for better comparison with the proposed site plan. The proposed site plan contains the majority of the buildings in the westerly corner, with the southeasterly side landscaped. The inclusion of 3 lakes aims to increase biodiversity, and a full schedule of tree replanting is proposed. The site includes 308 parking spaces, which will be provided. 23 of these will be for disabled persons. In order to anticipate a future increase in electric vehicles, 31 of these spaces will be active charging and 62 passive charging. Along with the layout as proposed, 3 of the building plots are undefined and subject to an approved details will be included for the appearance of these. As this is an outline permission, subject to an approval, the final landscaping and scale could be subject to change under reserve matters application. These are illustrative designs of the proposed workshops. These will be used for prop and set construction. These are illustrative designs of the stages. These are proposed to be on large open plan buildings for filming. The final design of these is expected to include soundproofing sufficient to keep noise intact. The applicant seeks to capitalise on the already established film and TV scene. The films shown here have used Norfolk and the wider area for filming locations. The applicant has stated that the proposal will boost the local economy and support an estimated 350 direct jobs and a further 250 indirect jobs using BFI data. In terms of investment, 84% of production budget is spent inwards. Production companies require the use of specialist services which can position themselves in close proximity to the studios, including a range of benefits. It is also stated that the range of specialist services will include set construction, prop making, grip and lighting hire, hair and makeup, post-digital production services. In collaboration with this, the proposal seeks to benefit the local economy through the increased use of shops, hotels and taxis by its staff. Whilst not a solely financial benefit, engagement and partnership is proposal with local educators through the film school. As part of the vision for keeping this studio Norfolk-centric, the school aims to train and give students an experience of the TV and filming industry. In this way, the proposal targets the next generation of filmmakers and gives them a grounding in Norfolk. The BFI claims that the companies involved in the film industry increased by 36% between 2014 and 2018 compared to the national average of 13%. The applicant states that the proposal will result in the spending of millions of pounds within the UK economy, with a significant proportion of that within the area. The next few slides are site photos taken from 2 visits in 2023 and 2024. I have shown the location of the photograph to the side in blue and the location of each picture relative to the site. The first photo shows the access looking east along the B1454. Subject to an approval, this is where the right turn lane will be located on Highways land. This shows the west view along the access of the B1454 towards King's Lynn. This is the main entrance to the site, showing Army Road to the right and the existing gatehouse. This photo shows buildings just outside the site boundary. However, it also shows the site conditions and relative tree cover along the site. This view is taken from outside the red line, looking westward. In a distance, a barrack block is visible. This view shows the current tree coverage around the proposed prop buildings, which is currently used as a car mechanic business, which is to be retained. This view shows Army Road. There's a fairly consistent tree coverage along this part of the road. As per the committee report, these are the material considerations that have been assessed. It is considered that the case is a finely balanced one, and at the time of writing, a few issues still remain under negotiation. However, subject to these sufficiently being resolved to the satisfaction of the relevant statutory bodies, a recommendation of approval is made. The final recommendation is as follows. Delegate authority to the Assistant Director of Planning to approve, subject to the satisfactory resolution of nutrient loading under the Habitats regulations, sufficient to address Natural England's comments, satisfactory resolution of the issue of the demolition of the barrack blocks, either via Section 106 obligation or condition to ensure policy compliance, imposition of conditions relating to any considered necessary by the Assistant Director of Planning, which relate to the time limit, the approved plans, ensuring that the footprint of the buildings shown on the proposal site will not exceed the stated dimensions in under reserved matters application, and prior to commencement, the submission and approval of the following documents. Final wording of the conditions is to be delegated to the Assistant Director of Planning, and that the application be refused if sufficient resolution in relation to nutrient loading is not addressed by the 31st of March 2025, and in the opinion of the Assistant Director, there is no realistic prospect of a resolution completed within a reasonable timescale thereafter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Officer. We have no town and parish speaker. We have no objecting speaker. So our supporting speaker is Mr. Gaughan. If you'd like to take the microphone. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. First of all, the officers here have been extremely thorough and very supportive of the investigative process that we've gone through to get to this point. I've arrived at this point because of very significant interest in the industry to provide something of this stature in this county. The majority of these studios exist in the Western Corridor from London, with the rather naive concept that that's where everyone wants to be, not least all the crews and supportive industries. That is not the case. There's a very strong demand for having this regional locality in an area where historically there's been fantastic filming activity over many, many years. Mostly locational, because this facility hasn't existed. So I'm really saying that this is a bit of an unmissable opportunity, really, to get something which is going to provide, in the rural environment, significant high-value jobs, a permanency, an education program. We're working closely with the University of East Anglia and the filming groups in the area. And I'm certain that it will be seen as one of the most valuable assets the county is going to have going forward. I hope you support it. We've worked very hard to get to this point. All outstanding discussion matters are at hand, and we will pursue all that's necessary to give satisfaction, which I'm sure we can. And therefore, I hope you will find it in your power to accept my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have we got anything from the local member?
Nothing received. This item was referred to committee by the Director for Place and Climate Change, not by the local member.
Thank you. Can we open the debate then, please? Would you like to just to kick us off? Councillor Toy.
I normally come up first just to kick things off to warm people up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yeah, just on the conditions, can someone explain to me what phase 2 is? It said about phase 2 in terms of contamination and what was it, ordnance?
So the phase 2 reports are requested by Environmental Health, and they are sort of the second stage of the assessment of the site. So phase one is normally sort of an initial stage, and then phase two goes into more detail. But Environmental Health are happy with the phase one at this stage, and they would like phase two at a later stage. So they are happy with the phase two, yeah.
So if I can follow on, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So just following on from that, then obviously looking at the comments by local residents about the possibility of asbestos, and that should be detected when we do that through a phase two. Thank you. And then shall I raise the question that most, if not all, the objectors have raised about the tyre mounting? How does that relate to this application? Because it may be that I don't know exactly where that is. So I'd like to understand how that relates to this application and whether it's part of our consideration today. Thank you.
We'll just show you on the plan where the tyre mountain is. Yeah, if you go on, yeah, so it's. Can you see them? You can see the mouse, can't you?
So does it relate to our considerations today?
It's not within the red line or the blue line, no.
No.
But
Okay.
obviously it's an ongoing issue, and enforcement are still in negotiation. So it's
That's fine. I just need to make sure that,
of course,
because it was commented by residents, but
Yeah.
whether it was actually part of our consideration.
Yeah.
Clearly it's not. It's been dealt with separately. So that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is
Thank you.
ongoing though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Vickers, sorry.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the potential for high quality jobs in Norfolk. And I think this does present us with an opportunity, not only for jobs, but for education as well. And I'm excited by its proximity to Fakenham. I've always thought that the very beautiful, well-preserved Market Square in Fakenham is an ideal filming location. So there's some bias there. So I am broadly supportive of this. I think, you know, around we have unspoiled countryside and we have market towns that will provide ideal filming opportunities. But most of all, you know, putting Norfolk on the map and bringing the potential for high quality jobs. So I'm kind of minded to support this, but I will listen carefully to any other arguments from my colleagues on the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very interesting proposal. I'm mindful of the inhabitants of Wickham Green Village, which is quite close by, and the questions about noise and light pollution. And I see there's environmental protection have a holding objection, but I'm assuming that's being addressed in the conditions, is it? And there's going to be an external lighting condition, but is there any other control over the lighting? And I've got a residual concern about the stone curlews and what's going to happen to them. And I wondered if you could answer all those questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll pick up the environmental health comments. So yeah, you're right. We've had a number of concerns raised by local residents, and our environmental health team have been investigating. Obviously, the applicants provided information which the environmental health team have reviewed. There are still some areas that further work will be required, and we're suggesting conditions to secure additional surveys. On the noise point, it's about making sure we inform the future reserve matters. So we properly specify buildings so they're not going to contribute to noise, because there's a two-way issue with noise. There's noise from affecting the filming activities, and also the filming activities themselves causing noise beyond the boundary of the site. So it's about trying to make sure we've got the right level of information as a planning service to inform the future reserve matters applications in terms of the details. So it's all about timing for me in terms of when we request that information. But subject to those suite of conditions, I mean, environmental health have requested some quite onerous conditions in my view. It's a question of finding sort of the right balance, because you don't want to over complicate the process for very difficult to comply with conditions. So we're trying to find, and obviously through delegated decision, we'll finalise those actual list of conditions. So we've got something that's enforceable and meets the 6 tests for conditions, because we need to be reasonable in whatever information we're requesting to support an application. Okay. Or do you want to pick up the other one?
So in relation to the stone curlews, obviously the RSPB did make comments about them, but following discussions with our ecologist, we needed to make sure that the requirements of the what the applicant needed to do were reasonable, and as such, the requested amended, sorry, not amended, the new ecology report will address specifically the stone curlew and the natterjack toad in a way that's actually feasible, because the RSPB had requested 3 years worth of monitoring prior to the application being submitted. So yeah, it's just a case of the new ecology report specifically addressing stone curlew and natterjack toads, because we know that they are local, but the land that the RSPB wish to monitor is not all entirely within the applicant's ownership as well. So that did provide issues, but we will draft a condition that will address that in a sufficient way to our ecologist as well. So it is going to be looked into as well. Okay.
You okay with that? Yep. Okay. Councillor Fisher, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Everybody else has so far has picked up on the things that same things that I've obviously picked up on. But this application has got a way to go, and it seems to be a brilliant opportunity to bring industry to this part of the area. And this is an outline planning permission. There's a number of backstops before this application is completed, and I'd like to put my weight behind it. Thank you.
Proposal. Is that a proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Fitzgerald, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. There's an awful lot of conditions to this application. I don't think I've ever seen one quite like this before. Do we have a time scale on it actually going forward, presuming that all the conditions are met?
When you say a timescale, obviously we've set out in the recommendation, there's a suite of things that need to be done before we could actually grant planning permission. Obviously, the key one to that is addressing nutrient neutrality. So we can't grant permission lawfully unless we've addressed the nutrient neutrality point. The conditions point, I mean, with an outline permission, we can impose conditions. Obviously, we're not dealing with all the reserved matters. So that the points about access, layout, appearance, scale, that's landscaping, they're all matters that we would agree later on. But anything to do with the principle of development, we can impose conditions as a planning authority at the outline stage. Now, there's lots of detail in here that have come from environmental health and others that relate, in effect, to specifications that would influence the reserved matters detail. So things about control, as I said earlier, about controlling noise impacts, and Rob's talked about the ecology impact. It's about making sure we inform reserved matters. So it's the timing of those conditions. There are a number of those, but it's not insurmountable for the applicant to provide that detail, because they'll need that to inform the reserved matters in terms of how the final detail will come forward.
You okay with that? Okay. Yeah, happy with it. Yeah. Councillor Hankin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say that I think this is an exciting development. Obviously, it's at a very early stage, and would be more than welcome in terms of sustainable development and putting Norfolk on the map. However, I have a question. Will this? I understand it's going to generate 300 odd jobs. Where will they live? Will this impact on the local planning development in terms of, the local plan in terms of housing development? Will this necessitate a review of that plan?
So the answer to that question is, in itself, no. Okay, so we've got a local plan that presumes, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, that the old airfields will be redeveloped appropriately and generally for employment related purposes, of which this is a
a decent example, it also presumes the existing one that will deliver many thousands of homes. The draft plan is working on the assumption that will deliver circa 10,000 over a 20-year period. And at some point today, possibly in about an hour's time, the Prime Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister are going to announce the next final version of the National Planning Policy Framework that will probably increase this authority's housing target quite a bit. So yes, there is a link between this and housing. Arguably, that's already provided for within the existing and evolving planning framework. But bluntly, at some point, depending on what is published later today, this council will have to come up with a whole load of allocations for further housing as well. So the direct answer to your question is no, we won't need to review off the back of this. But yes, we will need to review off the back of what the government will announce later today. And that assumes we can get our current draft local plan over the line in the next 6 months or so in any event.
Thank you.
Are you okay?
One more question.
Go for it.
In the document, it talks about the disused housing facilities for what were airmen, right, to be demolished. Is this, where are these barracks, and are they fundamental to the conversion of this site? It says they have to be demolished. I don't know, where are they?
So I think we're just showing you a map to show where the barrack blocks are. So these are referred to in the core strategy policy for the site allocations, for the allocations to do with former airbase sites, and also there's a specific site allocation policy for this site. Both of those, in allowing new footprint for development, will require an equivalent amount of demolition of the former barrack blocks. So there's almost a kind of trying to deliver a public benefit. These buildings are redundant and they're not going to be removed unless there's some development that goes with it. So there's almost like a quid pro quo. You allow X amount of square meters and an equivalent amount of barrack blocks are demolished on the site. So that's a requirement of policy, and that's why we've added it into the recommendation that we have those negotiations to secure that. Because our understanding is that the barrack blocks are under the control of the applicant. There's a complication of company structures and ownership, but that's not to say that can't be secured via legal agreement to make sure we get those barrack blocks removed, because that's what we would want under policy to secure. If I can just return back to the question that Councillor Hankins asked about the housing and the link, will this need housing? There's a subtle point here in relation to nutrient neutrality, because part of the argument is that people will be coming outside of the catchment to work at the site. And that's the point about adding additional load into the catchment for nutrient neutrality. So if you've got people living outside of the Norfolk nutrient catchment and coming in, it's adding additional load. I obviously won't go into the details of what that load is, but you can kind of get the picture that obviously people will come here and they'll need to use facilities, and that's adding to the load. It makes it quite a complicated assessment, because how do you decide how many people are coming in on a daily basis? And some people may decide to buy housing in the locality. As you say, they may want to live here on the basis they've got a good job, a well-paid job. They may want to live here permanently in North Norfolk or within the Norfolk catchment. So that slightly adds to the complication of doing the nutrient neutrality calculations. But yeah, just thought I'd sort of provide a bit more clarity on that point.
But there will be a variety of jobs, won't there? There'll be artisan type jobs, you know, for scene making and that kind of thing, and there'll be more highly skilled professional jobs. So the artisans are likely to live in the area, I would suggest.
I think that would be a fair assumption. I mean, it's not just the actors; it's all there's far more jobs that go behind the scenes of producing the scenery and the technicians and the sound stage people, and there are lots of different people involved in the production process, not just the actors. So yeah, you're right. There will be people who will want to live in the locality if they've got a secure job at the facility.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Obviously, this is, as has been said, an exciting possibility for the area in terms of, I think Mr. Gordon said there was 350 direct jobs and 250 indirect, or maybe it was the officer, sorry, who mentioned it, 600 jobs in total. But I just want to concentrate on a couple of things. Firstly, it's been the policy of this council thus far since 2022, when nutrient neutrality descended upon us, not to permit applications to be progressed until they were thoroughly vetted for nutrient neutrality. And there will be a lot of people, I think, looking at the outcome of this application, because this is a slight departure in the sense that we're considering imposing a Grampian condition in effect when the delegated matters are dealt with. That is to say that we grant permission at reserve matters stage, subject to nutrient neutrality being sorted out. Other authorities have gone down a different route. They have done that already at a much earlier stage, but we've decided to avoid giving false hope value to applicants by effectively honouring the spirit of nutrient neutrality government requirements. And so we've not made conditional consents historically. So that, I think, perhaps needs to be explained initially before I perhaps go on to other matters. So if I could address that point and that question to the Assistant Director who will be dealing with the reserve matters.
Sir Williams.
So can I cover that and arguably adjust the language that Councillor Brown used slightly? So I agree with Councillor Brown that clearly nutrient neutrality has been around now in parts of Norfolk, including this part, for something like 2.5 years. Okay, and broadly speaking, that says predominantly for additional overnight accommodation that we as an authority can't approve anything unless we are very confident and can control that the nutrient loading is neutral or better than. So in other words, we're not chucking more rubbish into the systems of note. There's then a kind of any other business equivalent component to the nutrient neutrality rules that kind of says, and any other type of development that might have a significant increase on people, my words, going to the toilet in the catchment. And a big film studio, particularly one that is near the boundary of the catchment, will inevitably bring additional people into the area who will, at some point during the day, I'm sure, make use of the facilities on site, etc. So there has been, on this particular application, a fair amount of discussion as to does nutrient neutrality apply or not, because it's additional overnight accommodation. We have taken the view and have been supported by Natural England that it does apply. Okay, so the applicant has a challenge to meet to demonstrate that they can basically make it nutrient neutral. And in some ways that's more complicated than for other sites. So if you've got a house, as Mr. Argyle said earlier, it's relatively easy to work out the additional load into the system that will be generated by that house. If you've got a big film studio development, it's a bit more difficult to work out actually how many people, how many might go to the toilet, etc., etc. So we've got an issue that we need to address. And Councillor Brown is right. This authority has generally not brought schemes before committee until those issues have been satisfactorily addressed. Okay, and I am oversimplifying this somewhat. For the first 18 months or so, after the March 22 Natural England position came into place, very, very little was approved. Very, very little got to a point of sorting out nutrient neutrality. In the last 6 to 12 months, stuff has started to work its way through that logjam. You know, there was news about septic tank conversions. There's been news about taking agricultural land out of production. Norfolk Environmental Credits has been set up. Partner local authorities with us have secured something like 18 million quid's worth of government funding to go towards things. So solutions have started to be found. Some other authorities have taken a slightly different approach to us. So they've brought some applications to committee and said to committee, we think these are fine, so please give us authority to grant, subject to, first, the nutrient neutrality being resolved before the bit of paper is issued. And in this particular instance, we've taken the view that this is the first one at this authority that is worth going down that route on. So we're not suggesting after today we will issue a decision tomorrow. We're not suggesting we put in place a Grampian condition, which would mean actually we give outline consent subject to something. We are suggesting that you could give us, me in this instance, authority to grant consent subject to the prior sorting of, so before the permission is granted, the nutrient issue needs to be sorted. Okay, so we're not, and we can't, legally we couldn't, Ms Croxon would tell me off if I ever suggested that we could grant this without sorting out nutrient neutrality, because we can't do that. So it's not a Grampian condition scenario, it's a resolution to approve subject to something being done first. In this instance, because of the economic benefits, because solutions are starting to be found, bluntly, because Mr Gorn does own and control a significant amount of land in the area and could potentially sort the nutrient issue there, we've got some confidence that it can be resolved, and bluntly getting that resolution might hopefully provide some impetus to the sector, the film industry, to get involved and take this forward. So it's not a Grampian condition style issue. Equally, the end part of the resolution, as Mr Argyle mentioned, is saying sort it by a given date, or be at least on the direction of travel to sorting it, or I should refuse it because nutrient neutrality hasn't been sorted. So effectively, if you agree to this, we're setting Mr Gorn a bit of a challenge. Get on with sorting nutrient neutrality, or you'll get a refusal on that ground. Whether this becomes the first of a number we start to bring to committee on the same thing, Mr Lyon and I will be discussing over the coming weeks. We're expecting a whole load of government announcements in the next hours, days, etc. It wouldn't surprise me if nutrient neutrality features somewhere in those. So in the new year, you might find a number of these. This one actually is quite unique because it's not about overnight accommodation. But Councillor Brown is right. It might have a few other people knocking on our doors saying, why can't you do the same with ours? And we might conclude we can. But the key point that I'm just going to re-stress is we are not suggesting that we grant permission before the nutrient issue is sorted. We're suggesting you give us authority to grant it once the nutrient issue is sorted.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Well, thank you to the Assistant Director for explaining that so clearly. So, and apologies for dubbing it as a Grampian style condition. Perhaps it would be better or more accurate to describe it as a Grampian in reverse condition, as it were. We're putting the cart after the horse. So anyway, I do hope that Mr Gorn will get that message that the of all the reserved matters, you know, the essential main feature is to crack the code for nutrient neutrality first. Because if he, you know, to assist him, if he concentrates on other aspects in equal measure, and it doesn't satisfy our nutrient neutrality requirements, then I wouldn't wish to cause him unnecessary expense, time and effort. So I think that's the message to get across quite on that aspect. I just want to go on to a couple of other things which are not going to be on the reserve matters necessarily, because that will come back and will be the subject of a further meeting, I think, in due course. If I can just clarify that.
So broadly, if Mr. Gorn sorts out the nutrient neutrality issue, and the other one is if we get a satisfactory resolution to the Barratt block observation that Councillor Hankins has made and Mr. Lyon commented upon, then Mr. Gorn will get his bit of paper with outline planning granted. He would then, or somebody else, doesn't have to be him, would have to bring forward a reserve matters application prior to the development occurring. At this moment in time, I would anticipate that application would almost certainly come back before this committee. Having said that, that's not a guarantee, because we do have a scheme of delegation in place, and it might be that everybody thinks it's absolutely wonderful at the reserve matters stage, and therefore a delegated decision could be issued. And also in the raft of government announcements and changes that are coming around the corner, they are talking about a national scheme of delegation which prescribes what comes to the likes of this planning committee and what is delegated to officers. And there is a working paper from government circulating on this issue, and one of the options in there would effectively say all reserve matters applications should be determined under delegated authority. Personally, I don't think that is something I would advocate, but it is an option that the government are considering. So I can't guarantee Councillor Brown's point.
Yes, thank you for that. That seems clear. Just a couple of other things. The safety of the site. I mean, if we had a policy saying that you can't develop in a location within, 1,000 metres of a significant safety hazard, which has, I think, been referred previously as the tyre dump, then this application would not see the light of day. But fortunately for the applicant, we don't have that. I see in the papers that there have been 6 fatalities on the B Road serving the site over 5 years and several accidents. It doesn't, what the papers don't say is exactly where the location on that stretch of road is. So it's a little bit irrelevant in that respect. But the traffic element is a consideration. I understand it's difficult to write into a Section 106 agreement that the applicant picks up pace on complying with the enforcement notice, which I haven't read the terms of, I must admit, so I apologise for that. And quite frankly, to use the vernacular, gets a shimmy on and starts to clear up the tyre dump site. At what point will the Section 106 agreement come into play? Presumably after the reserve matters have been completed. Can I just clarify that?
So can I pick up on a couple of those bits, and then Mr. Lyon or Mr. Argyle might want to comment on some of the details. So firstly, on the highways point. So just want to make a couple of observations. This is an outline application with all matters reserved. So you could argue we could be leaving absolutely every component of highways to a reserve matters stage. Having said that, the county have looked at this quite closely, and as you will see in the list of conditions, are effectively saying, and I'm assuming, I haven't read it in the last 24 hours, in part for safety reasons, a right turn lane on the B Road is an absolute prerequisite to making this development acceptable from their perspective. So therefore, that's a fairly strategic component of this scheme, and it is in the list of things that are suggested to be conditioned. So rather than just leaving it as a standard reserve matters, we go a bit further and say, but you will need to do this, and also require that within the first submission of reserve matters, rather than sort of push it even further down the line. Mr. Argyle did draw attention to it, but I just want to overly draw attention to it. The printed version of your papers on page 33, I think it is, refers to a section 278 agreement and a safety audit being sorted out before the grant of permission, that should have been in the conditions list rather than there, which is where it was on the PowerPoint version that Mr. Argyle showed. So that's a slight tweak to the recommendation, but broadly, we are trying to nail the headline bits of the access within the outline approval. Turning to speed, for want of the second part of what Councillor Brown said as a summary. So the Section 106 agreement would need to be signed, as with all Section 106 agreements, prior to permission being issued. Okay? And Section 106 agreements invariably say the applicant will do 5 or 6 things, however many it is set out within the Section 106 agreement, and will say when they need to be done. Okay. Sometimes it will actually say, for sake of argument, not necessarily relevant to this one, let's just take a different example. The applicant will give over a sum of money to be spent by, let's just say, the district council on something. So there will be an obligation on the applicant to give us a sum of money, and then there would be an obligation that we would commit to spend that money within a time frame and on the given purpose. So in this instance, would the 106 require Mr. Gaughan to do anything quickly? The answer is no, because the 106 won't require, and it can't require, the developments to take place. So there'll always be an uncertainty, bluntly, will the development take place? And that's not about this development, that would be true of any development. You grant permission for 100 houses, you can't guarantee it's going to happen. You can require something to happen within a time frame of it starting or prior to it starting. And our view, as I think, can't remember which councillor raised the issue earlier, to be honest, is that the tyre issue is a separate matter to the determination of this application and is being addressed. So some might argue slower than ideal, and I'm sure Mr. Gaughan has sat there and heard some of the comments on the subject, but is being addressed within separate legislative framework, and we don't feel we can link the two together.
Thank you. That's that's fine.
Third question.
Yeah, I think just to answer Councillor Hankins's point, in addition to what's been said already, I think is it EC7 requires that whatever is constructed in the site is matched by equivalent square meterage of demolition of the barracks, and there's a particular policy in our current core strategy that dictates that. So that's why the barracks have to disappear to compensate for the creation. And I would hope that policy is carried forward in the emerging local plan, because by the time this is determined on the reserve matters, we're likely to be into territory where our core strategy is going to be given a decent burial, and we will inaugurate the emerging new local plans. So on that understanding, finally, and I'm sorry I've taken so long, but this is such an interesting and challenging application in the planning sense, strict planning criteria sense. We're delegating matters, reserve matters, to the Assistant Director. I would like to make it clear from my point of view that I want all these matters covered, wherever possible, that it's not going to be like, a pick and mix approach, and that we set a time limit, and that's for, I'm going to be like the government, I'm going to say for pragmatic reasons, because we'll be on the cusp of saying goodbye to our wonderful core strategy that served us so well and put us in a platinum award position, let me say. I'll just shovel that in. And then, of course, we'll have the new emerging local plan. And I know that our extremely efficient solicitor to the council will be concerned as to, what actually feeds into the 106 process, which, local plan am I looking at? So I would like to suggest that we set a time limit. I'd like it sooner, but say 6 months from the date of any decision today, should this go forward? Would that be, given that there's Christmas in between, you know, I'm generous in that respect. I would hope.
So can I just respond just relatively briefly? So firstly, if you agree with the recommendation today, you would be empowering me, I think it is me, to issue an outline planning permission, but only if the Barratt blocks and the nutrient neutrality matters are resolved satisfactorily. Okay, and that might well in nutrient neutrality and possibly the Barratt blocks require a section 106 agreement. Okay. Secondly, there's a whole load of conditions that are mentioned on page 34 of your report, and I'll again shunt the highways point that was number 2 down into that list as Mr. Argyle showed on his plan, and bluntly anything else I might think of. And then the final bit, which comes to Councillor Brown's last point, is about the time frame for this, and which I did comment briefly on earlier. So it isn't unusual when you get to a point of resolving something subject to a section 106 agreement to have a bottom bit of your resolution that says something to the effect of, unless it's resolved in, I think this council normally says 4 months, but unless it's resolved within a time period, it should be refused unless we've got a clear indication that it's going well and about to be resolved. And that's a matter of judgment for me or the Director of Place and Climate Change. The resolution here, or the recommendation here at number 5, talks about that and talks about the 31st of March, which is what, 3.5 months, unless we're making progress, and I think it's going to happen. Personally, I think Councillor Brown's alternative, if I call it that, of not saying 3.5 months plus my discretion, because that's kind of what it says at the moment, and setting a hard 6 months is a reasonable alternative, but that's your call. If Councillor Brown had tried to set a hard 3 months, I'd probably have suggested to you that that is a bit tight, because getting all the legal machinations done is a bit ambitious in that time. But if, for sake of argument, you as a committee decided instead of number 5, let's just say 6 months from today, whatever that will be, June the, whatever day we are, 12th, 2025, then that doesn't seem unreasonable to me. It does set Mr. Gorn probably a bit more of a challenge, but it's not an unreasonable challenge in my view.
I think it's a cookie that crumbles both ways. So to be fair to our legal officer and to Mr. Gorn, perhaps 6 months is, in my view, about right. So on that basis, I also forgot to say thank you very much to the officer, Mr. Argyle, for his report and for all the work he's done on it, and for his presentation this morning. I'm quite happy to second it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Netherby.
Thank you, Chair. I think my point is probably a little more mundane than the ones we've just covered, but I'd just like to be satisfied on the basis that we're not going to be accused of allowing this to be put too close to existing housing, given the fact that it could be an 18, 19, 20-hour operation, given the number of people involved, given the question that we spoke of earlier about lights and noise. Can we be satisfied that we're not going to inflict something that locals are going to find a problem?
Okay, so and that's really why we spoke about earlier about the environmental health conditions and requiring information up front so that we inform the actual design of the buildings. So if we get the right information up front and the buildings are designed to a correct specification, then we really shouldn't be having any complaints from neighbours, because to my mind, it's too late at that point, because we would be creating a nuisance that then we'd have to use environmental health legislation to address. So we don't want to impose something so stringent on the application that it can't function as a film studio. So it's about sort of finding that sort of common boundary, really. And clearly it's in the applicant's interest to protect themselves from noise, because they don't want to film in a loud, disturbed noise environment, but also then to get that benefit to then protect residents from noise emanating from the site as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor John Toy first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, I put my portfolio holder's hat on for sustainable growth. Clearly, this would be welcome. I just quickly looked up as well. The latest I can find for March 24 is 1,575 unemployed. So actually, potentially, that's a third of our people. Although I suspect some may come from away, but I would hope that we would have a strong local recruitment into as many roles as possible there. In answer to some of the other questions, actually myself and the other councillor Toy have actually lived in what's now called Wickham Green when I served at West Raynham. And so in terms of maintaining buildings or, using our policy EC7, they are not of the best quality there. I'm sure some of the houses have been improved with people living there, but it's not the best quality of buildings. And actually the reuse of this site, I think, is a good move. But I would, whilst clearly many have said that they welcome this, the opportunities and the excitement of it, I think with the amount of conditions and the challenges ahead, we should just control the optimism bias on this and let officers do their work to make sure that if it's successful, then it's successful in the right way. So I welcome the comments from Councillor Brown about putting timescales on it so that we're not kicking it down the road potentially all the time. So I'm happy to support that. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that in. The accidents, it's a straight piece of road in what is a rural area. People tend to go a bit faster than they should there. It's always been like that. Again, the 6 accidents, I don't know what period that was over, but so yeah, none of those have it may well in the papers. I apologise if I've missed that, but they are, if you like, normal for that area and not. I don't think this will exacerbate that. It's happening already. The data's there. So it's already been seconded. I was going to come in with that, but happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toy. It's been an excellent debate, I think, and the presentation was good. Can we finish up with the other, Councillor Toy, and then go to vote?
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the officers for actually putting this application or pre-application in front of the committee, because it's quite an unusual one. So I thank you for giving us the opportunity to put our comments and our views forward. I think this is a very exciting application, and I'll be very interested to see how it goes. And I think it's a great opportunity for Norfolk, especially North Norfolk. And also thank you for clarifying that the Tyre Mountain, which I must admit did keep going into my head and talking to me, that is a separate issue and that is being addressed. So I would be fully supportive of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Toy. Can we have one last?
Thank you
From
so
Councillor
much.
Vickers.
Thank you so much, Chairman, for indulging me. So I just wanted to say that I welcome the Assistant Director of Planning's very sensible approach to nutrient neutrality, and I hope we see more of it, because in my view, it has been rather a straitjacket. And I also trust his judgment, and I would prefer to see the application stand being wholly delegated to him. I know that Councillor Brown has suggested an extra 6 months, and I guess I'm probably in a minority, but I feel I must speak up for the Assistant Director of Planning, who in my view does an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, so I just agreed with the chair that I'd interject and just seek some clarity as to which of the 2 time limits you're voting on. Personally, I don't mind whether it's 31st of March with some discretion in my direction, or whether it's a hard deadline of the 12th of June. But bluntly, what I do want is clarity as to what you've decided. I don't particularly care which. I'd probably, if you want my honest opinion, prefer a little bit of flexibility, but I could live with the 12th of June as well.
Can I please ask for Demographic Services to help me out here?
So as I understand it from members' debate, it is the section at the very bottom of the screen, which I'm just bringing up now, which is the 31st of March 2025 deadline, which is being questioned, not the delegation to the Assistant Director of Planning for all of the other outlined conditions above. Councillor Peter Fisher proposed acceptance of the officer's recommendation as detailed.
Yeah.
And that is the proposal that was first before, but I believe that Councillor Brown is proposing an amendment.
The problem with that is Councillor Brown seconded it.
I believe Councillor Brown was proposing a alternate arrangement. So if it's proposing an alternate as opposed to an amendment.
So Councillor Vickers seconded Councillor Fisher's
Yeah.
at that amendment. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you very much.
So we'll vote on
I still want to welcome you to your place as the chairman today, Councillor McDonald.
So we're voting on the original recommendation with.
So the original recommendation, which I've got on your screen, is that which was proposed by Councillor Fisher. However, there could be a proposal for an amendment, but there is an existing live proposal on the floor, which is on the screen now.
Do you want me to withdraw my proposal, Mr. Chairman? Okay, I won't.
Can I just add from the officer perspective, it is easier with that degree of flexibility, because at the minute we don't actually know whether a section 106 obligation will be required. So it depends on whether we need to have that as part of the demolition of the barrack blocks. It also might be required if we need to deliver nutrient neutrality mitigation. So at the minute, we need to get over the nutrient neutrality hurdle, and then about how do we secure any mitigation and how do we address it. So if we're too hard on a deadline, we could end up right up against a deadline and then in a difficult position. And I wouldn't want to be, as an officer, facing that sort of tight deadline if we're in a direction of travel that can support this application. So I'm personally in favour of flexibility, but the call is yours at the end of the day. I'm just saying from a council.
I don't want to cause any difficulty for this committee or for our officers. You know, I make you, Mr. Chairman, an exception, but to that. So I will withdraw the request for the 12th of June, 6-month hard deadline.
Thank you, sir.
In the spirit of cooperation and optimism that this will work. And I wish our officers the best of luck in dealing with it.
So I've got Councillor Toy and Councillor Fitch-Tillett that want to comment. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
No, ignore me now. It's moved on with Councillor Brown's comments.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, no, obviously I spoke in support of what Councillor Brown was put in there, so I thought I should clarify my position as well. I'm equally happy that officers do that, but I think we need to be robust. I think if they get that message that we want to be robust in this, in its delivery, and that it's not something that goes on and on, then I'm happy to go back to the original proposal. Thank you.
Thank you all. Councillor Hankin.
Thank you, Chairman. Surely the situation is that we are broadly in agreement with the recommendation. However, given the onerous conditions, I think it would be sensible to say this is the date subject to any sort of amendments made by the Director of Planning.
Can we, I'm not wishing to disagree with Councillor Hankins, can we leave it as the wording that is there? Because I know it wasn't deliberate on your part, but you've just introduced a different person, which is my boss, into that by the phraseology you use. So to me, I'm comfortable with the 3.5 months, March the 31st, with some flex. Mr. Lyons inferred that Councillors Brown and Toy have, for want of a better phrase, withdrawn their variant proposal on that point. And I think we had Councillor Fisher and Councillor Vickers proposing and seconding. So I would, not that I should do this, encourage the chair to move to a vote.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we take that to vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So just to confirm, 4 members, the recommendation is as detailed on the screen. Councillor Beattie?
For subject to conditions being met.
Councillor Brown,
4, ditto.
Councillor Fisher,
4.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett, 4, Councillor Hankins,
4.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor MacDonald,
4.
Councillor Neverway, Councillor John Toy,
4.
Councillor Kim Toy, 4, and Councillor Vickers, 4. That is unanimous, 11 votes for.
Thank you very much, everybody. Item number 9, development management performance. Sorry, the vote was for. Sorry, thank you very much.
Right, okay, so agenda item 9, pages 35, 36 and 37 of your agenda. So we've got the usual monthly performance figures. This is for the period of running up to October. Again, continuing to maintain good performance on majors and non-majors for decisions. Our sort of 24-month performance, again, but I think as Councillor Brown alluded to earlier, keeps us in that sort of platinum territory. So it's pretty good. On the quality, on sort of at the bottom of the table on page 35, you'll see that there's some unfortunate red coloured boxes showing a declining performance. Now, this is for context, this is a very small decrease, and this is due to the number of applications within a 24-month cycle. So it covers a 24-month period, and each month you move along to the next period. And that drop has happened because in that 24-month period, we have 1 or 2 less applications within that 24-month period. When you do the maths, when you divide the number of applications by the number of appeals that have allowed, you end up with a slightly lower performance. So it's about 0.02 difference compared to last month. But I have to report it because we need to be open and honest about our performance. But it's nothing to worry about. We're well within our own target of 5%. And again, well within the national target of 10% on quality. But yeah, so that's there. Happy to take any questions on performance before we move on to section 106 obligations.
Councillor Brown.
Well, I wish I had a platinum pen instead of my big biro, but I'm more of a big biro man myself to mark this piece of homework. Suffice to say that I don't think the government have us in mind when they're promoting new measures for planning committees. I think even the Deputy Prime Minister would be impressed with these statistics, and that's saying something, isn't it? So thank you very much for all the work that officers are doing, and for these statistics. They're very impressive. Thank you very much.
Item 10, appeals.
Well, we've just got the section 106 obligations. I don't know whether wanted to say anything on section 106.
Woodside is completed now on the list, and obviously Norwich Road, North Walsham has completed. That's a good one to get off the list. So, yeah.
And can I just comment on the Norwich Road, North Walsham one, just picking up on a couple of observations that were made in the substantive application here. So, you know, that was one where you gave me, or Mr. Fulcher, I believe, actually discretion beyond that period for the 106 to be sorted, which we ended up using bluntly, but the direction of travel was always positive. And in my view, it was the right thing to do to get to a conclusion where a permission was issued, rather than potentially having to issue a refusal or come back to committee, which might have put the delivery of homes in doubt, and being upfront about the number of conditions. Councillor Fitch-Tillett, I think, said there were a lot in that last list. There ended up being 64 conditions to the North Walsham approval, which probably is a recent record in North Norfolk.
Thank you. We on 10 appeals.
Okay, so yeah, item 10 to look at the appeals record. So we've had a couple of new appeals come in. we are pleased to report there are still no inquiries or hearings, so we don't really like inquiries and hearings because they take up a lot of officer time, but thankfully none of those. There are still quite a number of outstanding written representation appeals, and you'll see on page 42, we have had one appeal decision for Potter Heigham, which was dismissed. We also, since the report was published, we've had 2 further appeal decisions. So on page 40 at Hickling, the second one down on the list there, that also has been dismissed. The inspector wasn't particularly happy with the design of a single-storey rear extension, so it was dismissed on that basis. And also, if you look on page 42 at Wells, 34 Freeman Street, that application was also dismissed by the planning inspectorate. So concern primarily there about flood risk implications from that development. So again, our quality of decision making is being backed up by inspectorate decisions, which back our decisions that we take as officers and as a committee. So happy to take any questions on that. Obviously, there are enforcement cases as well, but I don't think there's anything particular to report on progress on those. But happy to take any questions.
No questions? Okay, good. So item 11 is planning service improvement plan. Is that you, Jay?
It is me. Right, so a couple of committees are going. It was in September. I brought a report to committee on a new local validation list. There's 54 requirements there, and we asked committee to go out to consultation. So we've completed that public consultation, which ended on the 27th of November. I won't say we were bowled over with responses. We had 16 responses from the public, but it's 16 more than I think we had the last time we did a local validation list consultation. So we have had a fair bit of engagement, not as many planning agents as we'd like, a few architects, a number of people from the parish councils and members of the public have been engaged in that. So yeah, it's good to get their sort of general feelings about how they feel about the local list. I mean, there are clearly concerns about the cost implication for producing planning applications. Obviously, if we have far too many requirements, people are concerned that it's putting up the cost of producing an application. And we have tried to address that, particularly with the householder type applications, which make up the volume of our cases. We recognise a lot of those applications won't involve a planning agent. Often they're schemes put in by householders themselves. So we have tried to reduce that the number as best we can. In terms of feedback, so in Appendix 1, I've just enclosed there a list of the responses that we received to the consultation. In the main, people were supportive of the validation requirements, but there was one that did seem to invoke quite a strong response against, and that was in relation to a requirement to do with applicants setting out how they've used AI technology in the production of their planning application. I think there probably was some misunderstanding about what is it we're actually requiring there. Now, as you all know, AI technology has grown vastly over the last couple of years. Yes, it can have quite significant benefits, but it also comes with some drawbacks if it's not used carefully and selectively. In particular, I'm sure if you've ever tried to use a AI platform, unless you precisely suggest what needs to be in that document and how sort of short and punchy that response is, if you don't do that, you'll get a response back that's very long and verbose, because those platforms have been trained to provide very long responses to almost look like they know what they're talking about. And the danger for that in the planning process is that if people use that to produce planning statements, we'll end up with 10,000 words rather than 1,000 words. And that will disengage the public from engaging in planning applications if they're faced with tens or hundreds or thousands of pages in support of an application. So for me, it's about making sure applicants, indicate if they've used an AI platform to produce an image or to affect an image, they need to be clear so members of the public can trust and rely on the information that's being presented. And it's as much about the applicant professionally backing their submission. So if they're submitting something using AI, they need to say, well, I'm professionally backing this submission. So if there are any questions, they're the ones that are responsible for that submission. So that's the key reason why we wanted this AI policy in there, because we know it's a fast growing and fast moving environment. And we want to make sure that applications are clear and we don't cause confusion from our members of the public and for the decision makers, because the last thing we want as decision makers is to be confused or blinded by a piece of evidence that actually wasn't correct. And then we all know cases where plans haven't been correct that have led to serious problems down the line, and we don't want to get into that position. So I think the learning that we'll take from this is that we'll make sure the guidance that goes with that AI requirement is specific and clear in terms of why we are providing it. The planning inspector are also requiring that level of information now. So we're not apart from other people. We're probably one of the first authorities to include this in a local validation list, but I think it's important to make sure we manage that. So all in all, that being said, the list isn't going to fundamentally change in terms of the numbers of requirements. It's just the guidance that goes with that. We'll embellish that to make sure it's clear for applicants in terms of what's required. I don't know if you just want to put on the screen, Lauren, the matrix, because in addition to the long list of the 54 requirements, which specifies when it's required in the guidance, we're also producing this matrix. So the top line in the green, A, B, C, D, they're different planning application types. So for A is a householder planning application. So anyone proposing a household application will look down the list of the requirements that may be needed for that type of application. So if you just scroll on to the next pages, there's a couple of pages. So anywhere where there's a tick, we're saying that document might be required in support of that planning application. So we're trying to make it a bit easier for people to work out what they need. So they can look down their column and say, oh, I need this one, this one, and this one. And then they would refer to the long list of requirements, and that will specify when that will be required and what we're saying they would need to do in support of that. So we're trying to, it's never easy trying to do a local validation list review, because it is always complicated, because documents are complex in planning application processes, but we have tried to simplify this as much as we can. And hopefully that allays any fears that people won't be able to work out what's required. But in terms of our recommendation on page 51, so we're recommending that we adopt the local validation list with some minor amendments that I've just highlighted and I set out in the report. I've indicated on page 49, paragraph 3.6, the suggested transitional arrangement. So whenever we go from one list to another list, there's always people caught in the middle, because people will be preparing applications as we speak. But we suggested a transitional arrangement. So if anyone hasn't submitted their planning application before the office is closed before Christmas, then they will be required to comply with the new local validation list that will come in from the beginning of the year. So we may end up, I mean, there's always a risk we will end up with people submitting applications that aren't strictly valid just to get in with the new in with the old list. But whichever line you draw, there will always be people trying it on. So we're just going to have to go with that. And yeah, I'll leave that to the committee to confirm whether they're happy for us to proceed on that basis. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Hankin.
Mr. Chairman. I recently attended an excellent briefing on the planning system given by Mr. Hall, and I commend it to members. I learnt an awful lot, and I think what was particularly interesting to me was the sort of straightforward professionalism and in the absence of planning speak, so to speak, and I'm not being derogatory, I'm just saying that it was very, very clear. I think consideration should be given to a similar briefing on section 106, because there seems to be an awful lot of confusion about what certainly in as far as I'm concerned, in where it applies and how it's applied and so on and so forth. I think that would be interesting. Thank you.
So if I can answer that rather than Mr. Lyon, because it's not directly related to his paper, but this side of Christmas, I'm keen to publish training dates relating to planning for councillors during 2025. I had a chat with Councillor Brown about this the other day. So we've talked about this here before. So we're likely to be suggesting there are 5 training dates during 2025, 2 of which will be targeted effectively at you as a committee. So stuff that is particularly relevant to the decision makers, 2 of which will be targeted at all councillors, so stuff that might be relevant to everybody, and 1 of which will probably be for people who haven't had any involvement in the planning system to date, so new councillors to planning. And if councillors have any views as to what you think it would be useful for you to be trained in, be that as a committee or as councillors, then could you just drop me a quick line? So I take Councillor Hankins there of having suggested that something on section 106 would be useful on that list. But if anybody else, we don't need a debate now, but if anybody else has any ideas, just drop me a line. But it isn't related to Mr. Lyons' report.
I also think 106 would be a good one. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, well, thank you to Officer Lyons for bringing this forward. I'm just wondering, the matrix, how will that be publicised or produced? Will it be on the website? I don't think it was in the papers today, was it? On the print agenda. And the other, well, more important point I wanted to make was we're now walking towards regime change by this government fairly quickly, I would venture to suggest. One thing, which I'll come on to in a minute, as regards the consultation on how planning committees should be reformed that was launched earlier in the week and whether we should get involved in that. I'm just wondering whether there's an argument for like a 2-tier matrix, that we have a matrix for major applications and a less complicated, straightforward matrix for domestic. I mean, I don't know, that might cause problems because the proposal by government is that potentially we're going to be divided into 2, divide and rule, you could say. There again, he might not say, in that, you know, we're going to potentially be faced with a planning committee for strategic development if the government get their way, and a subsidiary planning committee for non-strategic cases. And I'm just wondering whether we're comfortable bringing this forward on the 1st of January, given that before we embarked on this, and probably before this agenda was printed, we've now been dumped on by government with significant change to how we will have to operate. Do you think it's in the light of that, the trigger date might be a bit premature? I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. I've got no firm views on it.
I mean, the way the matrix and the 54 requirements have been drafted, there are different requirements depending on the scale of development that's being proposed. So if you're a minor development, there might be different requirements in that than there are for major applications. So we have tried to set out quite clearly when something is required, and it's all dependent on what's being proposed. So if you're proposing a minor scheme, we don't want thousands of pages of submission. We want a proportionate submission that enables a decision maker to make a quick decision. So we have for the long list, we have specified where it's major or where it's minor. So a good example is that where you need highway information. So only over a specific size of development will you need a transport assessment, or some may require just a transport statement, which is a lesser type document. So we have tried to be clear. We're not just doing one size fits all. We have a more bespoke solution there for different scales of development. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy just to say majors and non-majors, because it depends on site context. You might have a site with lots of different constraints on it that require reports that somewhere else wouldn't need. So it is all very context specific in terms of why you would need particular documents.
Thank you very much. Happy.
Thank you. Councillor Netherby.
Yeah, I just wanted to to absolutely support Councillor Hankin and his suggested 106 training, because I think that's, for me, one of the most important aspects, because I'm often asked in the field about it and I don't know enough. So yeah, definitely, please.
I agree. I mean, I'm constantly being asked by people, what about the schools? What about the medical things? Well, it was already catered for in the 106 here. What is that? And you try to explain. I'm never very good at explaining it. So I agree also. Councillor John Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just congratulate officers on the work they put into this? I think that the matrix is fantastic. Yeah, and obviously, you know, Councillor Brown's picked up a few things, and I'm sure that will refine over time. But I think it's a really good starting point, very easy to use. I'm grateful that you've put in the AI labelling. I think AI will be much more, and it's great that we're heading that. And having said that, you know, these consultations that are going on, let's not be following it. Let's lead it. Let's say this is, look, we think this is good. We're doing this. And so let's set the tone. Let's bring it to North Norfolk. Let's not North Norfolk get watered down by others. That would be my driver behind that. That's a position I take with a lot of this. We have to go business as usual and actually say, we think we're doing it the best way, and this is where you should be coming. So I don't know if this needs a proposer for the recommendations. Then I'm happy to propose the recommendation. Can we just confirm, is it done just by this committee? Does it have to go further stages just by this committee? Thank you. No, but I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Toy. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Well, I was going to propose as well. So if John's proposed, I'll second. And I do think that matrix is brilliant.
Thank you. Agreed. So shall we go to vote on that?
I don't require a recorded vote. A show of hands would be sufficient. And that's all in favour. That's accepted.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before we perhaps close the meeting, could we just go into private session and have a little chat about whether we ought to be responding to this government consultation on planning committees?
Can I do it in two different ways? Firstly, can I make an observation and then comment on Councillor Brown's comment there? So firstly, it is highly likely you will get communication from us next week that suggests that the meeting scheduled for the 9th of January won't take place and will take place effectively instead on the 23rd of January on the reserve date slot. Okay, so it won't be an additional meeting, it will be just moving the meeting back. There are a couple of reasons behind that. Firstly, if we have a meeting on the 9th of January, in terms of local government rules, it would mean we'd need to publish the papers before Christmas, which isn't a million miles away from this date, and that would be challenging from an officer perspective. But secondly, and probably more relevantly, the government have announced that today they will publish their new NPPF. They haven't done yet, or they haven't done a minute and a half ago anyway, when I last checked my computer, and we do need to give some consideration to what that says within the future report. So it's not 100% definite, but just for your awareness, it's sort of 99.9%. There will be a meeting on the 23rd rather than on the 9th in the new year. Okay, and Democratic Services are aware and comfortable, indeed prefer, I think it would even be fair to say, that as an option. Secondly, I think Councillor Brown's observation is very sensible. It might be worth him leading a brief discussion on the working paper that the government put out the other day if councillors wish to hang around for 10 minutes after the meeting. But I think it doesn't need to be in private session per se. It can just be an informal discussion once the meeting has closed, would be my view, Councillor, if that's okay.
So does that conclude it?
So that is all the business concluded on the agenda, Chairman. So it's just for you to close the meeting.
Okay, thank you all very much for very healthy debate today and good presentations from the officers and your support. I'll close the meeting at 5 past.